Members of Parliament's Rules Subcommittee are in Westminster this week in the United Kingdom to research how to improve oversight over the Presidency. It forms part of efforts by the legislative arm of government to prevent a repeat of what happened during the state capture years, as per the recommendations of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. One of those MPs in the UK is the Freedom Front Plus Chief Whip, Corné Mulder, who's joining us as a part of the delegation. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mulder. Grateful for your time. Let's start first with any observations, if you've made any so far, of what we could learn from the UK and bring back here as part of oversight over the Presidency.
Yes, we are at the moment busy with our oversight visit and our fact-finding visit here at the British Parliament and looking at the British institutions in terms of how they keep the Prime Minister of the UK to account. And we've had some fascinating discussions so far and some very interesting interviews, and we will continue with that tomorrow and on Thursday. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from the process and see if we can make some of these things applicable to our situation in South Africa. So we are in the beginning of our visit here, but I'm optimistic that it will be quite successful.
And what specifically are you looking for as a member of the committee, and what sort of questions are you asking in terms of improving this legislative space?
Yes, well, if you look at our South African constitution, you'll find the founding values of our constitutional dispensation in section 1 of the constitution, and the constitution clearly stipulates there that transparency, openness, responsiveness are some of the core values. Now, the problem in South Africa has been for the last 30 years that we do not have a specific committee in our constitutional dispensation or the parliamentary process that is doing that kind of oversight over vote 1, and that's the vote of the Presidency. And you'll also know that in the last couple of years, that specific department or the office of the President, the Presidency itself, has been increased dramatically with all kinds of different things added to the Presidency, with the Minister in the Presidency, etc., as well as the Vice President. So what we need is the necessary mechanism that can successfully also do oversight and scrutiny of that very, very important office. And from my perspective, I'm looking at the best possible model that we can implement within our constitutional dispensation.
And when you look at the rest of the team that is there with you, do you get a sense that across the party aisle, there is a similar commitment to being able to do this successfully?
I believe so. It's a senior delegation. We are 5 members of Parliament and then also some of the senior support staff of Parliament. And the 5 members of Parliament are basically 3 from the ruling party and then 3 members from the opposition. But they're all senior people and they are all committed, and I think we're on the same page. We think it's a lacuna in our current system that we do not have that kind of oversight, and we think that we can succeed in changing that.
And it's a key moment to reflect on this, because we've seen, especially in the last, decade and a half, also an increased concentration, if you will, of ministries being placed in the Presidency. I'm thinking most recently of what was going on around the electricity minister and the concerns that have been raised therein. It's a very important time to make sure that everything that goes on within that office is actually laid bare before Parliament, is it not?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Sometimes people will say that the President is founded in that almost a different cabinet or executive within the Presidency, and that makes it even more important that we basically do that kind of oversight. So there's an interesting thing that we are seeing here in the UK. They've got what they call a liaison committee. And the liaison committee consists of the chairpersons of all their select committees, but one must also understand that their select committee chairpersons are not only from the ruling party. They do that on a proportional basis, so there's a good spread of chairpersons from all the parties in their parliament. And they form a liaison committee with a chairperson, and that committee interacts with the President, in their case the Prime Minister, on at least 3 occasions per year, where the Prime Minister will come in and face questions from these people, and that is a public process, and they can then do all the necessary scrutiny and ask all the relevant questions, and the Prime Minister needs to answer them.
And do you think that the lack of this oversight over the Presidency in South Africa in these almost 3 decades since the democratic dispensation, do you think it was mere oversight, a lack of anticipation perhaps of what would unfold in subsequent years when you look at how that office has been used allegedly to basically sell off the country during the state capture period? Or do you think it was by design, deliberate, so that things would be concealed?
I don't think for 1 second that it was done by oversight. I think it was a deliberate decision taken by the ruling party at the time for various reasons during different presidencies. It's unthinkable that you put up these oversight committees for all the different members of the executive and all the different budget votes in Parliament, but you don't do that for the presidency. And from the FF Plus's point of view, and some of the other opposition parties have all applied some pressure throughout the years to say that we need to do that kind of oversight. It seems that at last we are now at that point, and I think it will be a very constructive and a positive step going forward, that we also then enrich our dispensation by having that kind of oversight over the office of the presidency, yes.
And even when you look at the departments then, or cabinet, where there is oversight in the form of the parliamentary committees in Parliament, some of the members of cabinet, these are ministers, have been accused over the years of basically open defiance, picking and choosing when they would appear. Even the boards of state-owned entities have been accused of similar behavior. I'm thinking of concerns that were raised around Mildred Oliphant when she was the Labour Minister. The committee wasn't pleased with how much she appeared. Lindiwe Sisulu now, in the last few weeks of her time as minister, basically clashing with the Tourism Portfolio Committee. I remember the SAA board and issues there, and ESCOM when it came to reporting before Parliament. So great to have a structure, but for the structure to work, there needs to be cooperation.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right. I think one of the lessons that we've seen here, and I think we must understand that, is that the executive has got their own role and has got their own responsibilities, and you can't expect the members of the executive to attend parliamentary committees on a weekly basis. It's just not practical. So it's not a question of the number of interactions with the executive. I think it's more about the quality. And we will have to look at the system in terms of how do we improve the quality, that when we do that oversight and we have that interaction with a member of the executive, that is done in a thorough manner and that we all feel satisfied afterwards. And the same with the state enterprises as well. You're absolutely correct.
Do the oversight committees from South African history, do you think, work better when they're not chaired necessarily by someone from the majority party? The most commonly quoted example is Scopa, where we had Themba Godi, and now it's the IFP's Mkhuleko Hlengwa chairing, even though his party is not the party of majority in Parliament.
Yes, that's exactly the right way that we should do these things. And what we see here in the UK at the moment is this, that they are not shy to have chairpersons from other political parties. And what you then find is that those committees sometimes almost are apolitical, in the sense that it's a combined effort to find what is the truth and try to do the best in terms of how can we improve things, how can we keep the executive to account, but also what proposals can we make to make things better. And I think it's unacceptable, and we've had that for many, many years, and I hope that the ANC will take note of that, that we need to have chairpersons from other committees as well, from other political parties as well. I think that will enrich our constitutional system. And going forward, that will be definitely an improvement, and we see it here. It's not a problem, the fact that the ruling party does not chair all the committees. And by doing so, you get all other parties to buy into the system, and together and combined, they get to a better result in the end.
Corné Mulder, part of a parliamentary delegation currently in the United Kingdom, basically on a study visit, if you will, to see how the UK practices oversight over the Prime Minister's office, to see how we can do that over the presidency. Thank you so much for your time tonight, sir.